A paralyzed widow gets dumped like trash in a muddy town square, but a quiet rancher steps up and says she's the strongest person he knows. And that's when their amazing story of building a home for the broken really starts. That's the hook. That'll inspire you in this heartwarming Wild West adventure, friend. Let's dive in. No one wanted the paralyzed widow until the lonely rancher said, "She's stronger than I'll ever be." Kansas, 1889, Central Market Square. After the flood, mud still clung to the undersides of wagon wheels. The air was thick with the smell of wet hay and rotting grass. Vendors had laid out what little goods they could salvage after the storm. Bruised apples, damp sacks of grain, and second-hand boots drying in the weak sun. Through the crowd rattled a wagon with one broken wheel. The man driving it barely slowed before jerking the reins to stop in the center of the square. In the back sat a thin woman, hair matted from days without a comb, her body folded into a crude wheelchair, wooden planks, and mismatched iron wheels. Her hands clutched a wool blanket like it was the only thing left in the world. "This one cannot walk, cannot bear children, eats more than she earns," the man declared, his voice sharp enough to slice through the market chatter. "Anyone wants her, take her. If not, she stays here for the dogs." A ripple of laughter and murmurs ran through the crowd. "She looks like a broken doll," someone muttered. "Poor thing," an old milk seller said, shaking her head. "Pity's one thing, feeding's another. Who'd take her in?" Marilyn Ellis kept her back straight. Her eyes were dry. No tears, no pleading. She looked at them the way a rescuer might look down into floodwaters, knowing some would drown and some would fight. From the edge of the gathering, a tall man in a worn brown coat and hat watched in silence. Boone Kessler didn't move until the man on the wagon turned away to spit. Then he stepped forward, boots splashing in shallow puddles. He took hold of the wheelchair's handles. "She's not." "Garbage," he said. "I'll take her to my ranch." The man turned, scowling. "She's my family's property. I didn't say you could." "She's breathing," Boone cut in. "That makes her a person." The man's lip curled. "You think you can just?" Boone's voice was steady, low, but it carried. "I can, and I will." The man hopped down from the wagon bed, squaring his shoulders. "She's under my roof. She eats my bread. You want her, you pay." "You're not selling a mule," Boone said, "and I'm not buying a life. Then she's not yours to take." Boone straightened, releasing the wheelchair long enough to turn and face the crowd. His words came like a gunshot. "If anyone here thinks a human life is worth less than a horse, try and stop me. I'll take her home." The crowd stilled. A few men shifted uneasily. No one stepped forward. Boone gripped the wheelchair again, angling it toward the edge of the square. The man behind him muttered a curse but did not follow. As the crowd parted, Mara's hands tightened on the blanket. Her voice, soft but clear, reached Boone's ear. "Do you do this for attention?" Boone didn't look down at her. "I don't need attention," he said. "I need to see you live." They left the market in silence, the sound of the wagon wheels fading behind them, replaced by the steady crunch of Boone's boots and the faint creak of the wheelchairs. Axles. The road to Boone's ranch stretched long and empty, the horizon broken only by the sway of tall prairie grass. By the time they reached the weathered gate, the sun was leaning low, painting the land in gold and dust. Boone wheeled Mara across the packed dirt yard and up to the back porch. He opened the door to a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of cedar and soap. At the far end waited a small room, tidy with a single bed neatly made, a wooden chest at its foot, and a narrow window that looked out toward the wheat fields. A folded quilt rested at the edge of the mattress. It was clear the space had been prepared, though Mara could not imagine why. The sheets were fresh, the floor swept. Even the oil lamp on the bedside table was full and trimmed, ready to be lit. She looked from the bed to Boone. "You had this ready. I had a room," he said simply, parking her chair just inside. Now it is yours. Mara gripped the wheels and moved herself farther in, her eyes never leaving him. I can manage. Boone nodded. I know. That first evening, she tried to do everything herself, awkwardly transferring from chair to bed, unpacking the threadbare blanket she had brought, arranging her meager belongings on the chest. Every movement cost her effort, but she refused to ask for help. When dinner came, Boone did not enter. Instead, he set a tray outside the door, a bowl of stew, a thick slice of bread, a jar of fresh water. Foods! Here! His voice came through the wood, calm and unhurried. Only after a long silence did his footsteps retreat. The pattern continued over the next days. He would knock once, leave a meal, and walk away without a word, unless she called for him. He never stepped inside without her invitation. One morning, as the light crept through the narrow window, Mara noticed something new on her pillow. A soft piece of folded linen. She reached for it and found a handkerchief, old but clean, edges embroidered with faded thread. The single letter L was stitched in one corner, careful and elegant. She stared at it for a long while before wheeling herself to the doorway. Boone was on the porch oiling the hinges of the screen door. She held up the handkerchief. This is yours. It was my mother's, Boone said, not looking away from his work. Why give it to me? Finally, he set the oil can aside and met her eyes. Because I think maybe no one's ever asked you how you want to live. Her fingers tightened around the cloth. And you think this asks? It says you have something of your own here, Boone replied. Even if it is just a piece of cloth. Mia did not answer. She turned the handkerchief over in her hands, feeling the ridges of the stitches, the weight of the fabric worn soft by years. For the first time since the market square, her shoulders eased just a little. Boone returned to his hinges, and the sound of the metal turning under his touch filled the quiet space between them. The days began to lengthen, the spring winds carrying the smell of tilled earth across the yard. Mara had started spending her mornings on the back porch, the wheels of her chair settling neatly between the planks, watching Boone work. He never called her girl or any of the names she had learned to flinch from. Every time he passed by, it was the same. Morning, Miss Mara, he would say, tipping his hat as though she were a lady in Sunday silk. The first time she had almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the sound of her name spoken without pity felt strange in her ears. It took her a moment to answer. Morning. She had managed, her voice unused to civility. Boone showed her how to feed the hens without letting them peck her fingers, how to scatter the grain wide so the smaller birds got their share. He placed a shallow wooden box across her lap so she could carry eggs from the coop without spilling them. You ever plant? He asked one afternoon, kneeling in the garden row. Not since I was a girl, she said. Well, it's the same as then, he replied. Only now you do it sitting down. He dug a hole, pressed a seed into her palm. She lowered it into. The earth covered it, patted it down. The dirt was cool against her skin. For a moment, she felt as though something else, something unseen, had been planted too. By the third week, her hands had grown more sure with the soil. She did not notice at first that Boone had started leaving his work close to the porch whenever she was outside. He never said it was so she could talk to him, but the quiet between them had begun to fill with small, steady words. It was late afternoon when the sound of hooves broke the rhythm of the day. A tall man in a brown coat rode up the drive, dust clinging to his boots. His eyes swept over the yard before settling on Mara. You, he said, dismounting. You're coming with me. Boone stepped out from the stable, wiping his hands on a rag. State your business. The man pulled a folded paper from his coat. I'm her husband's uncle. She was left on our property. This here says she's to be returned. Family property gone astray, worth a debt's payment. Mara gripped the arms of her chair, her pulse hammering. I am not. Boone moved between them, his shadow falling over her. One hand rested casually, but not idly, on the butt of his revolver. In this place, Boone said evenly, property does not breathe, and she's breathing just fine. The man's mouth tightened. That paper's legal. Then take it to someone who cares more for ink than blood, Boone replied. His voice did not rise, but the weight in it made the air feel heavier. The uncle looked past Boone, his eyes sharp with warning. You'll regret crossing us. Maybe, Boone said, but not today. The man hesitated, then swung back onto his horse. Dust rose behind him as he rode off toward the road. Boone stayed there for a long moment, watching the trail until the rider vanished. When he finally turned back, Mara was still staring at him. Her hands had loosened from the arms of the chair, but her heart was still racing. You did not have to, she began. Yes, Boone said. I did. She swallowed hard, looking down at her lap. That's twice you've pulled me out of the fire. Boone's gaze softened. Then maybe it's time we stop letting folks throw you in. Mara held his eyes for a moment longer. She realized then that Boone had not just given her shelter. He had made a promise, one she had not dared hope anyone would make again, and for the first time since the flood, she felt that the name he called her might truly belong to her. The morning sky was pale with thin clouds, the air holding that cool, stubborn breath of late spring. Boone led a saddled bay mare into the yard, a curious piece of carpentry fixed to the leather. It looked like half a chair built from polished pine and iron bolts. Mara rolled her chair closer, eyeing it. What is that? Boone patted the mare's neck. A frame locks into the stirrups in the cinch. Let you sit steady without your legs holding you. He glanced at her. Thought you might want to ride again. Her fingers tightened on the arms of her chair. I have not ridden since. I know, Boone said. But if you want to try, this will keep you in the saddle. Mara stared at the frame, the smell of leather and horse sweat rising in the breeze. If I fall, then you fall, Boone said simply. And get back up. She drew in a breath. I will do it. Hay helped her transfer from the chair to the mounting block, then into the strange frame. It held her snug, her hips level, her torso upright. The mare shifted once beneath her, patient and warm. Boone stepped back. Take the reins. Mara gripped them. The first few steps were jerky, the mare uncertain of her new burden. Boone walked alongside, saying nothing. He let her feel the motion, the sway, the pull in her arms. By the third circuit of the yard, she was smiling. Then the mare stumbled on a rut. The frame tilted and Mara pitched sideways. She hit the ground hard, dust kicking up around her. Pain shot through her palms where they scraped the earth. Boone stood a pace, away, watching. Mia pushed up on her elbows, her breath sharp. Are you going to just stand there? You need my hand? She hesitated, then shook her head. Not yet. It took 3 tries, but she got herself upright, dragging her chair close enough to climb in. Her arms shook, her skirt torn at the hem, but she looked at the mare and said, Again? Boone's eyes narrowed slightly, not in doubt, but in measure. All right. The second fall came half an hour later when she tried to turn the mare too sharply. This time her elbow took the brunt, the skin raw against the dirt. Again, Boone waited, silent, until she asked, Help me, please. He was there in an instant, lifting her with care. That is enough for today. No, she said, her voice low but firm. One more. They went again and again until the sun dipped lower and the shadows grew long. When she finally agreed to stop, she was stree with dust and sweat, her hair loose from its braid, but her eyes held something new, something fierce. That night after supper, Mara sat by the window, mending the small tears in her apron. She noticed Boone at the table, a spool of dark thread in his hand, her riding skirt folded in his lap. He was sewing the torn seam, his stitches, slow but careful. "You can sew," she said. "My mother taught me," Boone replied without looking up. Said, "A man who can fix his own clothes will never go begging." She watched him for a long moment. "You did not have to do that." "I know." When he finished, he smoothed the fabric once and set it aside. Their eyes met across the lamplight. There was no pity in his gaze, no trace of the guarded sympathy she had, grown used to. What she saw there was quieter, heavier. "Respect?" Boone stood, collecting the mended skirt. "Tomorrow we will try the south pasture. Smoother ground." Mara nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "All right." As he left the room, she touched the clean stitches, feeling the strength of the thread. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of fresh earth and horse sweat. And for the first time in months, Mara felt as though she was not learning to be less, but learning to be more. The wind carried the smell of rain that afternoon, though the clouds had not yet gathered. Boone had left at dawn, heading toward the county's seat to buy sacks of seed for the spring planting. His last words before riding out had been, "Keep the doors barred and do not open for anyone." Mara had nodded, Samuel napping in the small crib beside her chair. By midday, the yard was still, chickens clucked lazily, and the mare in the corral swished her tail against the flies. Mara was peeling potatoes at the kitchen table when she caught movement beyond the fence line. 4 men on horseback, riding slow, scanning the buildings like they owned the place. She sat down the knife, her stomach tightening. The riders halted near the barn. The tallest of them, wearing a tattered gray coat, dismounted and walked toward the porch, his boots crunching on the dry dirt. Another man looped the reins of 2 horses over the fence post. The third and fourth began drifting toward the corral, eyes on the mare. Mara wheeled herself to the front door and slid the bolt into place. Her fingers brushed the smooth wood of Boone's rifle hanging on its hooks by the window. She hesitated for only a second before lifting it down. It was heavy, the barrel cold in her hands. Outside, the man in the gray coat pounded on the door. "Anyone home?" he called, his voice low and mocking. "Looks quiet. Maybe we just help ourselves." Mara rolled to the side window, easing it open just enough to slide the barrel through. She could see them clearly now. Worn leather, unshaven faces, the easy swagger of men who had taken what they wanted before. The man reached for the latch on the barn. Mara sighted down the rifle, aimed at the hard-packed earth an inch before his boot, and squeezed the trigger. The crack split the air. Dust jumped at his feet. He staggered back, swearing. "Hell, who's shooting?" She racked the lever and chambered another round. Her voice was steady, though her heart hammered. Next shot is not the ground. The man's head jerked toward the window. "Lady, you got no call." The second shot struck a split-rail fence post, splintering. It inches from his hand. The others froze. The man in the corral dropped the lead rope, muttering under his breath. The tallest raised both hands, stepping back toward his horse. "We do not want trouble." "Then ride," Mira said. For a moment they hesitated, maybe weighing whether a woman in a chair could hold them off for long. But then another crack split the air. This time a warning shot that clipped a tuft of grass just shy of the corral gate. The mare stamped and snorted. The men swung into their saddles. Without another word, they turned their horses and rode off at a gallop, dust trailing in their wake. Mara kept the rifle aimed until they were specks on the horizon. Only then did she set it across her lap, exhaling slowly. When Boone returned near dusk, the wagon loaded. With seed, the first thing he noticed was the faint tang of gunpowder in the yard. He spotted the fresh gouges in the dirt and the shattered rail on the fence. Inside, Mara was back at the table, peeling potatoes as if nothing had happened. The rifle leaned against the wall beside her. Boone set his hat on the peg and stepped inside. What happened here? She looked up, meeting his eyes. 4 men came for the barn. And the horses. His gaze flicked to the rifle. And you stopped them? She shrugged lightly. I did not stop them. I protected my home. Boone studied her for a moment, then smiled. Slow, genuine, a rare warmth breaking through the stoic lines of his face. Remind me never to cross you, Miss Mara. Her lips curved faintly. You are safe. You are not stealing my grain. He chuckled, shaking his head, and walked to the window to look out over the quiet yard. The seed sacks rustled in the wagon outside, the only sound between them for a while. Finally, Boone turned back. You did well. Mia said nothing, but her hands moved a little steadier on the potato knife. She had not just defended his land, she had defended hers. The rain came without warning that night, sweeping in from the west in long silver sheets. The sound on the tin. Roof was steady, insistent, a lullaby for some, a restless drum for others. Boone sat on the porch steps, the glow from the lantern at his side casting soft light across the wet yard. Mara rolled her chair to the open doorway, a shawl over her shoulders. You will be soaked through, she said. I do not mind, Boone answered without looking back. For a moment, they listened to the rain together. The smell of damp earth and cedar drifted in with the wind. Boone's voice broke the quiet. There was a time, he said slowly, when I wanted to quit living. Mara's hands tightened on the armrests. When after my mother died, Boone said, his gaze fixed on the dark yard. It was a fever. Nothing the doctor could do. I was 19. I thought I was strong enough to keep the ranch running. But the cattle starved. That winter. The fences rotted. I could not fix a damn thing, and every day I woke up thinking there was no reason to. I had no one. Nothing I touched stayed alive. He drew a breath. Rainwater dripping from the brim of his hat. I would sit out here at night listening to the coyotes, wondering if it would be better to just stop. Mara's eyes softened, but she did not speak. Boone glanced back at her, the lantern light catching the wet lines on his face. You ever think like that? She looked down at her hands. The day of the flood, she said quietly. The river swelled so fast, I was in the kitchen. My husband was outside shouting for me to take the high trail, but I saw him slip. The current pulled him under the fence. I went after him. The water was black and freezing. I thought I could reach him. Her voice faltered. I remember the cold more than anything, she continued. It took my breath, made my arms heavy. I grabbed a piece of his coat once, but the current tore it away. After that, nothing. When I woke up, I was on the riverbank. The sky was gray and my legs, she swallowed hard. They were not mine anymore. I could not feel them. I could not even shiver. He was gone, and I was half of what I had been. Boone turned fully toward her now, elbows resting on his knees. You were still in the water when you lost the use of your legs. She nodded. But I kept swimming. I do not know why. Maybe because stopping felt worse. The rain seemed louder for a moment, filling the silence between them. Boone's voice was low when he spoke. You are stronger than I ever thought, stronger than I will ever be. Mara's gaze met his. Then be strong with me. The words hung in the air, steady and sure. Boone rose from the steps and crossed the porch. He crouched beside her chair, close enough for her to see the flecks of rain still clinging to his beard. He hesitated only a moment before placing a hand over hers. It was not the touch of an owner to a rescued thing, nor of a man to a fragile soul. It was the grip of someone who recognized another survivor. Mara let her hand turn beneath his fingers, curling to hold on. She could feel the warmth of him, the steady weight of someone who had been to the edge and chosen to step back. They stayed that way until the rain eased and the lantern flame began to sputter from the damp. When Boone finally stood, he said nothing more. But as he reached to close the door against the wind, Mara's voice stopped him. "Boone," she said softly, "thank you for telling me." He nodded once, eyes meeting hers, then shut the door and left her, with the fading sound of rain and the feeling of his hand still in hers. The frost had just left the ground when Boone began building. For 2 mornings in a row, Mara heard the scrape of wood and the thud of a hammer long before breakfast. She wheeled herself to the window, watching him measure planks beneath the pale dawn. He worked without a coat, sleeves rolled up, breath steaming in the cold. By the 3rd day, she saw the shape of it, posts sunk deep into the earth, a slanted roof braced toward the east. When he came in for water, she asked, "What are you making out there?" "You will see," he said, the corner of his mouth tugging into a half-smile. Days later, Boone knocked on her door. "Come outside." The air was crisp but gentle, carrying the smell of damp soil and cedar shavings. Boone pushed her chair across the yard to the new structure. Morning sunlight spilled beneath the fresh roof, warming a long trough of turned earth. "It is the best light on the ranch," Boone said, stepping back so she could see it all for sunflowers. "Sunflowers? You told me once they were your favorite." She remembered. She had said it offhand one quiet evening in winter when they spoke of things they missed. Boone knelt and placed a small sack of seeds in her lap. "This is your patch, your garden." She brushed, her fingers over the paper, then down into the soil. The earth was dark and rich, crumbling between her hands. Something in her chest loosened. They worked together in silence, Boone fetching water, Mara pressing each seed into place, covering it with a careful pat of soil. The sun crept higher, turning the air warmer. Her shawl slipped from her shoulders, and for the first time in a long while, she did not reach to pull it back. When they finished, she sat in the center of the patch, hands stained brown, hair loose around her face. Boone leaned on the fence post, watching her smile, full, unguarded, touched with light. He realized he had never seen her like this, not even in the quiet evenings they had shared. "You look—" He stopped, searching for a word. Mara raised a brow. "I look what alive," he said finally. Her smile softened, but she looked away, letting the warmth of the sun rest on her skin. Boone stepped closer. The sunlight painted gold along. His shoulders caught in the lines of his face. He rested one hand on the back of her chair. "Mara," he said, voice low, steady. "If you ever need a name to sign on a letter, I would like it to be mine." She turned to him, the words sinking in. "I do not have a ring," Boone went on. "I have no speech ready. But I have this land, and I have what I feel for you. If you want my name, it is yours." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air was filled only with the sound of a meadowlark somewhere beyond the barn. Mara's eyes brimmed, but her smile grew instead of breaking. "Boone Kessler," she said, the syllables rolling carefully from her tongue. "That would make me Mara Kessler. That would make you whatever you want to be," Boone said. She reached up, fingers curling over his. Then yes, the tears slid free, warm against the cool of her cheeks. But she did not look away, and she did not hide her smile. Boone squeezed her hand, the grip firm. "Sure. Good," he murmured. "Then we will tell the sunflowers when they bloom." They stood there a while longer, her in the chair, him beside her, watching the morning light stretch across the earth they had just planted. And though the seeds lay unseen beneath the soil, Mara felt as if something had already begun to grow. Spring had returned to the Keetor ranch. bringing the sound of young voices where once there had been only wind through grass. The yard bustled, women in packed skirts hanging laundry, children darting between sheds, an old soldier mending fence with slow care. It had started small, a widow with nowhere to go, a boy orphaned by fever. Then another came and another. Boone never asked for their stories. Mara did, writing each name in a worn leather journal with a note of the first thing they smiled about here. On one page she had written, "This is the place where women sleep without fear." That morning, Boone stood in the corral, resigns in hand, steadying a patient May mare. A small girl sat stiff in the saddle. "Easy," Boone told her. "Feel the ground through her feet. She will tell you when she's ready." The mare stepped forward. Boone walked alongside, murmuring encouragement. Across the yard, Mia knelt with 3 young women, setting seedlings in neat rows. One girl glanced toward the corral. "He's real patient with her," she said. Mara smiled. "He's always patient with those who think they cannot." By midday, the smell of baking bread drifted from the kitchen. People came and went, trading jokes, carrying tools, calling each other by name. The ranch was no longer just a ranch. It was a choice to stay. Late in the afternoon, a lone rider appeared on the ridge. Boone's posture tightened. Mara recognized the narrow shoulders and pinched mouth, her late husband's uncle. He rode into the yard without greeting. "I hear you've got quite a collection here," he said, eyes sweeping. "The place and my nephew's widow still breathing on your charity." Boone stepped forward, blocking Mia from view. "You heard right. I came for what's mine," the uncle said. "She was married into my family. That makes her careful." Boone cut in, voice low. "You will not like the end of that sentence." The man's gaze shifted and he saw them. Not just Boone and Mara, but a dozen strong, silent people watching. The old soldier stood at the fence, arms crossed. The young women in the garden had tools in hand. Even the girl on the mare held Boone's rifle across her lap. The uncle's jaw worked, but he tugged his ree. "Keep her," he muttered, riding away without looking back. When quiet returned, Mara exhaled slowly. Boone glanced at her. "He will not come again." "I know," she said. "That evening," she wrote, "I was once left in a marketplace like a broken thing. But one man saw me. Not the legs I lost, but the heart that did not break." Weeks became months. Mara kept at her exercises, pushing harder with Boone's steady hand nearby. The town doctor had given little hope for movement, but Boone never repeated it. One morning, she felt it, a tremor in her thigh. Boone was there instantly, his arm anchoring her. Through summer into autumn, she practiced, standing with both hands on the porch rail. Then a step, then 2. Boone never hurried her, never let her fall. Every night he lifted her into bed, and every morning he was there when she rose. One cool afternoon, Boone was splitting wood, axe steady in the crisp air. Mara pushed herself from her chair, gripped the rail, and stepped slow, deliberate, across the yard to him. He turned, startled, as she said, "Boone, we are going to have a child." For a heartbeat, he only stared. Then the axe dropped to the dirt. He caught her up, lifting her clear, spinning her until her laughter filled the air. When he set her down, his forehead rested against hers, breathless. "You have given me 2 lives. Today." "No," Mara whispered, hands at his neck. "We gave them to each other." The sun dipped low, fields gilded in gold, and on the Kessler Ranch, the place of the survivors, life went on, stronger than ever. And that is how the Kessler Ranch became more than land and fences. It became a promise, a place where the broken were, never thrown away, where survival was not the end of the road, but the beginning of something stronger. Mara and Boone's story is not about rescue. It is about two people finding the courage to live again and giving that courage to everyone who came after. If you want more tales of grit, love, and second chances, under the wide western sky, make sure you subscribe to Legions of the Wild West Stories because out here, every heartbeat is worth telling.